Yeah, we're so happy to have everyone here today. This is going to be a really interesting talk. The theme is local economic development and its relationship to climate change in the Hudson Valley. And so we have two presenters today. I think we'll have March go first, and her role is to give us sort of an overview of how economic development works, how it's organized in our area, and all the what you might need to know as new folks on the scene. So Paige is going to go ahead and introduce March.
Okay, so thanks so much, March, for being with us. So March Gallagher is an attorney with master's degrees in public policy and environmental studies. She's a mother and lives in Rosendale. March's family owns 3 Main Street businesses, Jarita's Florist in Woodstock and Inquiring Minds bookstores in Saugerties and New Paltz. She currently serves on Congressman Antonio Delgado's Small Business Advisory Committee and on the board of the Farm and Food Growth Fund. March worked as Deputy Director of Planning and Head of Economic Development for Ulster County from 2009 to 2013. After leaving county service, March worked as Chief Strategy Officer for Pattern for Progress, where she wrote and presented regional studies on infrastructure and healthcare. And immediately before being elected County Comptroller, she served as President and CEO of Community Foundations of the Hudson Valley, an $80 million plus charitable fund. And she is also an advisor for Partners for Climate Action. Thank you for support, March. We are really lucky to have you. And so, yeah, now she will give us a primer on how regional economic development works in the Hudson Valley.
Great. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm sorry I was a couple seconds late in hopping on. And I'm so excited to be talking to you about this because I feel like you guys are working at kind of the next phase of what we need to think about in the Hudson Valley and across the world. And too many times these two topics don't come together. I thought it was interesting that I was being asked to do this because I used to serve on the Governor's Regional Economic Development Council for the Mid-Hudson region. And because of my background, I was asked to be the intermediary between the Mid-Hudson Sustainability Plan and the Regional Council. And what I found is that most of the people on the Regional Council really didn't get why we needed to be thinking about sustainability at all. And it was a very challenging experience. And now I kind of feel like we're starting to see in all the communities in the region much more of a realization about why this might be important. So I'm really happy to be here today. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay. Yeah, so I'm not sure the best way to do that. I'll start my slideshow, but you guys will have to tell me if I'm showing you anything. I don't know. Let's see. Do I have that ability here?
You should. I did give you permission.
Oh, okay. It says okay, here we go. Okay, there we go, guys. Great.
Great.
So yeah, so here I am starting with my cover slide, but really I just feel like you guys are working at the intersection of the most important things. If we're not developing in the right way, we're not going to be able to address sustainability, and there's a huge opportunity right now. So from where I sit, what do I see as the biggest risks? I'm sure you guys are all dealing with this, but flooding, erosion, stormwater, septic, sewer, inundation, that's going to be a huge problem, especially for river towns, but everywhere. Crop viability is coming to the fore. I mean, we talked about the Farm and Food Growth Fund in my bio, but I also sat on the board of Hudson Valley Hudson Valley Agribusiness Development Corporation for many years, and I know that this is an issue that we're really starting to plug away on. We're going to see changes, right? We're going to see maybe stone fruit isn't as good here. Maybe we need to try different varieties. Maybe we're going to lose all of our maples like we've started to lose our ash. I mean, we're just starting to see a bunch of different stuff. I think we're going to see mass migrations. I know of climate refugees right now living in Kingston. These are people who were priced out of Queens after Hurricane Sandy. Hurricane Sandy happened, they got priced out, they came up to Kingston. That's not what we say, that's not how we talk about it, but that's the reality. And then lastly, invasive species, which is everything from Japanese knotweed to problematic vegetation, but it also includes things like ticks and Lyme disease. So we have to keep that in mind. So these are some of the challenges that, that I'm seeing. And then why is it even important? And I'm going to hammer away on this, you guys, and I'm hoping that you'll come back to me with questions. And I think this is the kind of presentation that I put together. There's so many dang acronyms and what I'm going to share with you. And it's so, the PowerPoint is so dense and horrible that hopefully some of you are going to call me in a year and be like, what the heck were you saying? But the point is that we have to do planning so that we can get the money to do education and to do implementation. So planning first. Of course, I'm a planner, so it's easy for me to say that. Now, I'm going to take you through an array of dizzying layers of entities that think about economic development in the Hudson Valley. We have federal agencies and programs, and they affect all of your towns. I see where you guys are. I know what you're working on. And we don't often think to ourselves oh, maybe there's Department of Commerce, Economic Development Administration money, or maybe USDA can fund this. But a lot of the rural areas are USDA eligible, and you can pay for things that are, really in the sustainability mode, things that are more infrastructure related. And I feel like a lot of times communities are accessing these federal programs almost by accident. So I wanted to bring them to your attention. Then we have the state level, we have the regional economic development councils. And I know this stuff is really dry, you guys, but this is how the majority and the lion's share of grant money in New York State is filtering to communities right now, is through this regional council process. New York State Ag and Markets, also really important. We don't always think about it that way, but it really can be a source. And then Environmental Facilities Corporation. I found something when I was working at PAorg, because I got very invested in working on infrastructure when I was there. And EFC, the way they were allocating money at the time was that if a community was operating under a consent decree, their scoring was elevated, and then they became eligible for funding. So there was this kind of backwards thing, bad communities were being allocated funding. Now, the problem was those communities hadn't done a map plan and report. They weren't ready to accept the money. They didn't have their shit together, which is why they were operating under consent decree. So EFC, Environmental Facilities Corp, would allocate money to them. They wouldn't use it because they weren't ready. And then lo and behold, Environmental Facilities Corp is sitting on $1 billion, which, by the way, the governor tapped for the Tappan Zee Bridge, and there was litigation over it. But sometimes the incentives we have in these programs are really messed up. You guys are going to find this. You're at the forefront. You're planning. You're thinking about climate impacts and your community and sustainability. And meanwhile, some of these funding streams prioritize those who are not where they should be at. So I just wanted to warn you about that. Department of Environmental Conservation, the Greenway program, and dozens of other programs, and NYSERDA, which always has these rolling opportunities, and then New York State DOT. It's a very large number of state agencies and possible funding streams. Not all of these go through the regional council, but a lot of them do, some of them do. So it's worth taking a look at. And then regionally, we have Pattern for Progress, which is a regional planning entity that kind of works 9 counties of the Hudson Valley. The Regional Plan Association, which does all the strategic planning for the New York City metro region. In the 4th regional plan, that is the first time we got them to include the Hudson Valley. I'm sorry, the Hudson Valley is part of Metro New York. Sometimes we don't want to admit it, but it's true. So, and then the Regional Council, which I said a few words about, but I'm going to say a little bit more on the next page. I urge all of you to get in touch with your county planning department. I feel like that is the doorway to so many educational programs, funding streams, strategic plans. Email them, get on their mailing lists, from transportation dollars to Environmental Facility Corp dollars to, local funds. I really think they could be a great partner for you. But then you also have Department of Health, the economic development agencies, and they're different. I think we have 3 counties here, right? Ulster, Dutchess, and Columbia represented. Yeah. So you guys, you have to look at who is the right entity what is the name for the entity at the county level and economic development in your community, because they're all different. And then industrial development agencies, which I want to say a few words about, because I think there's a lot of negativity around those organizations, and we have to really look at what it is they do. And then really, you're probably operating at the local level with your planning board, zoning board, conservation committee or council, and the plans that they put forward. So I want to say something about the plans. And the reason I want to say something about the plans is that a lot of times the opportunity to get your project funded is heightened if it aligns with the plan that the funding agency is making a decision under. So these are all the plans that I could sort of think of, you know, the 4th regional plan for the metro region, which by the way, no money comes from that I can see to the Hudson Valley. The regional council strategy. And then there's another thing called the comprehensive regional economic development strategy, because I'm going to take you in the next slide. I'm going to show you there's actually 2 regional councils, because we like to name everything the same and make it really confusing. We have the Mid-Hudson Regional Sustainability Plan. You know, I would love to see a situation where the regional council only funds things that align with the sustainability plan. Doesn't that make sense? But that's not how we do things. It's not given the type of elevation that it should be. And then your counties all have economic development, open space, housing, comprehensive plans that are worth looking at, especially if you're going to be applying for county money. And then imperative and kind of most basic is your local plans, your town comprehensive plan, your town zoning code, local waterfront revitalization plan, Main Street plan, open space plan, whatever those plans are. So I really think it's important for people to get familiar with what the plans are, even if you don't read them all. I mean, a lot of times these things are a snooze fest, but as you start to think about a specific project in your community that you want to implement, you might be able to find support for those in the plan. And then as you're trying to present it to your town board, to your conservation committee, you know, to the county planning board, you can say this aligns directly with, and start naming those plans. And I really think that's an important way to frame some of what we do. And honestly, I mean, maybe it's because I'm a converted planner. I think we don't do enough planning, and I think we really need to do more planning as we're facing this climate catastrophe. So it's imperative. All right, this slide, I really just wanted to show you guys what a show things are, okay? This is kind of all the entities in the Hudson Valley that entrepreneurs might need to deal with. I didn't put this together. A fellow named Tony DeMarco, who's been involved in promoting entrepreneurship for many years, has. He's at SUNY New Paltz now. But you can see that there's just a huge number of entities. Why am I showing this to you? I mean, you're going to have your own set of entities as you work through the municipal framework, and some of these are directly relevant, like the chambers of commerce and, you know, and the regional council and other things like that. But more importantly, I wanted you to see that when it comes to private sector investment, how challenging and confusing it is, because the businesses that are trying to do things in your community are dealing with this massive array of like acronym, you know, soup to get what they need. So it's just an example. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I wanted you to see it. All right, I really wanted to focus on this. Which regional council are we talking about? There's actually 2 regional councils in the Hudson Valley. The first one is called the Hudson Valley Regional Council. It's made under a multi-county agreement. It is specifically for one purpose, which is to tap into federal Economic Development Administration money. They create this thing called the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy for the region, CEDS. If your project does not align with CEDS, you get nothing. And we have seen over the years more and more money here. And I think under the Biden administration, you could see a big tranche of funding, particularly in the area of sustainability, come through these regional councils. Other regional councils, there's 10 of these in New York. Some of them are aligned with the metropolitan regional planning agencies, and some of them are not. In the Hudson Valley, we do not have a regional planning agency, which I think is a problem and a mistake. I personally would like one. The Hudson Valley Regional Council, by the way, for Columbia County folks, is kind of a stepchild in the sense that Columbia County is not really included in either the Albany or the Hudson Valley. At least the last time I looked, they were kind of in between. Anyway, the last point is just that the bylaws mandate participation by all the counties and all the cities. And then there's a few appointed positions, but otherwise a lot of these are by title. And I find like entities by title, people just check out. They don't go. So like I was appointed to this to represent Ulster County, and I show up to my first meeting and there's like 3 people there. I'm like, what are you doing? You're planning for the whole region. So that's the first regional council. Why the Governor Cuomo, when he set up the regional council process in New York, had to choose exactly the same name, I don't know, but it's the Mid-Hudson Regional Economic Development Council. And we have a Capital District Regional Economic Development Council that includes Columbia County in it. They make prioritization. They do create strategic plans that are usually 1 or 2 years at most. And those plans actually do elevate applications for state funding almost on a ton of programs. And I'm going to give you a list of those in a moment. So it includes appointments by the governor and also some elected officials. But it's important to be aware of those, because if your town is putting forward, an application for strategic planning dollars that has to go through the regional council, you might want to know who those players are. And you might want to know what that plan says. So yeah, it's kind of confusing and dumb, but it's the lay of the land. All right, I want to talk about IDAs for a second. And please, I'm kind of rushing because I know I only have 20 minutes. So if you guys have a question, you can flag me down. Otherwise, we're going to go into groups afterwards. I wanted to talk about IDAs. I was appointed to serve on the Industrial Development Agency for Ulster County in 2006. And I wound up chairing that organization and sort of revising a lot of their policies and procedures to make sure that they have appropriate guidance on giving out these tax benefits. But mostly what the industrial development agencies do is they provide tax abatement for development. I kind of like that idea because I like the idea of giving incentives for what we actually want to happen. And the tax abatement falls into a few different categories. One is sales tax abatement on construction materials, which has got to be huge right now at the price of construction. Mortgage recording tax abatement, which is like a 1% or less of the deal that's being transacted. And then the one that's the controversial one is this real property tax abatement, or PILOTs, payment in lieu of taxes. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about this is that I think PILOTs there's a lot of negativity around PILOTs. And when I became chair of the IDA, we were looking at the PILOTs like, are we even getting what we paid for? You said we're going to create 50 jobs and you created 1. What are we doing? So PILOTs have gotten, a lot of oversight. There's a lot more review now, but I wanted to show you guys this graph. What PILOTs do, and think about it, right? You have let's just say you have a vacant lot, right, worth $50,000, and you're going to put, $100,000 building on it. So the assessed value, the tax value of the property is going to jump from, 50,000 to 100,000, basically in that 1 year when you do your development. So before the pilot, you see the yellow area to the left of the chart, and that really is, your $50,000 base. Then as you build, the future property value is going to go up to the orange value. You're going to increase the value of that property. What a pilot does is it ratchets in the new tax value over a 10-year period. Why would you want to do that? I'll give you some reasons. One, many projects have cash flow issues at the beginning of the project where they need that build in over time to kind of start making the project flow, et cetera. So it does bring it to full tax value. And the main point I want to make with this chart is that you're not losing existing tax base. You're losing the green part of the chart under that line as you move from the old tax value to the new tax value. Now, you got to enforce your agreements, and you got to think about why you might have these, that we have state to state competition in incentives for the development you want, and that New York State is a very high tax state. I'm going to give you an example. I was working with this great company. It's called Stavo Industries. I'm going to just speak really frankly about them. They were operating in 5 separate buildings in Kingston. They make high grade filtration equipment. When I went into the site into the plant to do my walkthrough, they showed me, oh, that's water filtration equipment going to Paraguay or something. It's like, what? But anyway, they wanted to stay in Kingston. But meanwhile, Georgia, the state of Georgia, was begging them to move down there, offering them like property and built space at a fraction per square foot of what we charge in Kingston, with like a massive tax deal. We are in a competition. Our companies here are being lured out all the time, and we're a really high tax state. So I just feel like I need to point that out, because it's really easy to get on the bandwagon where you're just like, I hate pilots, I hate IDAs, they're terrible, they're horrible. But the truth of the matter is we're in a national competition. We can't just get rid of them. So we really need to figure out how to use it to do what we want. Now, when at Ulster County IDA, what we did is we said, great, and this goes back to 2006 and 2007, so this is really old news, but we were like, let's say if you're doing urban infill, so you're redeveloping an existing site, and you're on a bus route where we have transportation, and you have water and sewer, and it's appropriately zoned, we're going to give you a much better tax pilot. You know, let's give you better incentive to not develop greenfields. Now, that has not been taken to the next level. I'm disappointed. You know, they haven't really addressed those tools in 10 years, and they could be doing more, but it's a start. So I think you can use pilots, you know, our pilots bet, I think you can use them to incent the development you want. I'm going to give you another example. I don't know how many of you know Woodland Pond. It's a continuum of care facility that really takes people through regular apartment living to assisted living to skilled nursing home beds. And it's in New Paltz. It was the largest deal that the Ulster County IDA ever did. I think it was $106 million or something like that. The project was stopped. The project was going to disturb lands within 90 feet of a wetland, and the town had a 100-foot buffer rule. We actually were able to work out something on that, which resulted in the project giving the town a host community benefit agreement that included like a pool of money to preserve other wetlands in the town. So you got to look at these things as an opportunity to get the things that your community really needs. And I want to say that there's other kinds of pilots in New York State. And I think as we deal with affordable housing and some Main Street issues, I want to just bring these to your attention. These other pilots just operate as of right under real property tax law. When I say as of right, what do I mean? I mean, the building owner just fills out a form, drops it off at the assessor, and they get the pilot. There's no hearing, there's no controversy, it just happens. 485A is a 12-year partial exemption for non-residential property converted to a mix of commercial and residential. So if you're doing Main Street properties and you want to put apartments upstairs, this is a good thing to look at. And again, these kick in when you're adding value. Pilots are only good when you're adding value. 485B is a partial exemption for things altered, installed, or improved that are over $10,000. I don't know, do you guys know Rick Alfondre from Alfondre Architecture? When they built their beautiful, amazing green design building, I mean, I think it's Leeds Platinum. He and I he was saying, you know, the taxes are going to kill me. And I was like, why don't you look at this program and you know, fill this out, fill out this one form and it can reduce your taxes. It literally worked. And then 581A, which says affordable housing should be taxed based on the income coming into the property, right? You know, don't tax this like it's full of Airbnbs, right? This is real people paying, you know, paying rent. So there are these other things out there, and I just wanted to mention it to you. It could be a tool for your community. This is so much stuff. So I really wanted to kind of give you big takeaways of what I think you guys in this program should do. I think you should get on the mailing list for all the relevant agencies for your community. So like I said before, county planning, but it does not hurt. Get on the regional council list for your region so that they're emailing you stuff. Get on the email list for things like the Hudson Valley Greenway, New York State Energy and Research Development Authority. You've got to start having that information filter through you so you know what's available. And I think, you know, meet your county partners. I do think that all the counties have expertise that can assist the municipalities, and that's part of what those departments are there to do. So, you know, whether it's the tourism department, whether it's, you know, economic development or planning, I urge you guys to get in touch with them. or Department of Health, by the way. Let me give you an example. In Dutchess County, there were some vacant storefronts in Red Hook, in the village of Red Hook, and the business that wanted to move in there was Yum Yum Noodle Shop and a bakery, and the Department of Health requirements for water and sewer were more stringent than could be provided. I actually don't think there was water and sewer capacity. I think it was private well and septic. And working with the Department of Health, the business was able to use existing flow data from another location. Like, they know exactly how many times their customers are flushing the toilet or how much water they're using in their process. And they were able to use that to tailor something specific to their hamlet. The reason this is important is having vacant main streets is dumb from a sustainability standpoint, right? This is where we have density, we have traffic, this is where our cars are going. It's usually where we have infrastructure, and these things are already built. And meanwhile, we're saying, no, you can't put a noodle bar in there because we have these water standards that were never going to be met because the hamlet doesn't have water and sewer. It was very convoluted, but it's worth kind of pushing your Department of Health and getting to know them. I want to share with you guys some deadlines, and then I'm going to close. Everybody needs to be looking at this consolidated funding application. The deadline is July 30th. All of your municipalities should be putting in an application for something, because when you look at all of the funding streams under it, and if you go to this is a link. And so once this presentation is done, we'll have the team mail it out to you. It includes, parks money, waterfront revitalization money, brownfields money, strategic planning money, smart growth money, energy efficiency money, Main Street grants, green innovation, everything. So you guys really should take a look at this for your pet projects. And one thing, there's a bunch of strategies to approaching this, but certainly the earlier you look at it, the better. Looking at how they funded things in past years can also be helpful, because then you'll see like, oh, they really didn't like that, whatever project, but they did like this trails project. You know what I'm saying? So it'll give you a sense of some of the things that were palatable. The Hudson River Valley Greenway Grant Program, I don't know if it applies to all you guys, but there are deadlines in September and November. There's environmental justice grants, community impact based. It's July 1, so you might want to look at that. And the Clean Energy Communities Program through NYSERDA is always happening. It's kind of a rolling basis. So unfortunately, it's like a lot of gobbledygook. It's a lot of acronyms, but I urge you to get in touch with these agencies and review some of these programs, starting with the consolidated funding application, which is like the window to money. And I just want to pause and say something about money here, which is that money only comes if you have planning behind it. And so you're in a position now where you're going to be able to take a more strategic approach to what your town is doing. You want to be looking at strategic planning, creating strategic plans to achieve your goals. By the way, I think this is true for federal infrastructure money. We are going to see, nothing I've talked about here is federal infrastructure dollars. You are going to see an infrastructure bill that is going to prioritize, things like water, sewer, transportation, and those communities that have strategic plans done for some of that are going to be able to take advantage of it. So if you have engineering reports done on your, bike lanes, for example, you're going to be able to apply for implementation dollars. You have to plan to implement, and you've got to do it in that order. So I guess I'm going to pause right there. I know that was a lot, and I'm sorry to give you all these acronyms, but unfortunately, that's the way we do economic development in New York State. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, March. And I think that big takeaway that you need to be doing the planning now to be able to even apply for money is just like such an important takeaway for our group. And it's really like the why behind, like, why are we doing all of this? What feels just like red tape, that feels just like busy work or make do work. It's actually like, this is what they're going to be asking for when you actually want to put in the bike lanes in your town, or you want to, you want to start the municipal composting program or whatever it is. It has to be, you have to prove out and show the larger strategy and the research behind it. So Thank you, March. So important. Okay, so we've paired March with Judy Wicks, whose presentation is really about taking some of the alphabet soup of economic development and actually translating it into a personal story. March is here to translate the alphabet soup, and Judy is here to put a face to that and talk about her history as an entrepreneur herself and how she's really built in sustainability into her everything that she does. Judy joins us from Pennsylvania, where she is the founder of All Together Now PA, which is a non-for-profit with a mission to unite urban and rural communities. All of our towns here are rural communities. And she's trying to look at new models for building resilient, self-reliant regional economies. Judy also runs the Circle of Aunts and Uncles, a micro loan fund for local entrepreneurs who don't have family or friends who can lend them startup capital. And she's also the founder of Sustainable Business Network of Greater Philadelphia, which she started in 2001. And she's also the co-founder of the nationwide Business Alliance for Local Living Economies, BALE, right? Now called Common Future. In 1983, Judy founded the Alliance, Judy founded the White Dog Cafe, a pioneer in the farm to table movement. So starting out, not unlike March, with local bookstores and cafes, really small businesses. She ran the White Dog Cafe until 2010. She's also the author of Good Morning, Beautiful Business, published in 2013, which won a national gold medal for business leadership and has been translated into Chinese and Korean. Her numerous local and national awards include the Impact Award for Economic Justice from Social Venture Network, Women Chefs and Restaurateurs Lifetime Achievement Award, and the James Beard Foundation Humanitarian of the Year Award. So Judy, we're so thrilled to have you here to share your story with our group.
Thank you, Vanessa. It's great to meet everybody. Let me just go right to my screen sharing here and hope it all works out. Let's see. Did it do it? I don't think it did it. So maybe I have to do this. There. Can you see it now?
Perfect.
Okay. All right. Well, it's a pleasure to be here to share my story with you. My focus is really on local economies and how important that is, you know, in the face of climate change. So here we go. So as Vanessa mentioned, I ran the White Dog Cafe started in 1983, and I wanted just to focus on 3 lessons from the White Dog: reimagining growth, protecting what we love, and moving from me to we. So reimagining growth, you know, in the business world, the mantra is grow or die. Just keep building your businesses bigger and bigger and spreading out across the country. And I chose not to do that because I didn't want to lose what made me happy in my business, which was the authentic relationships with everyone that I bought from and sold to and in my community. So instead of starting another White Dog in someone else's community, I started the Black Cat next door to the White Dog, which served another need of my community to have local gifts and fair trade. So then I began to see how chain stores were like invasive species, that they move across the country, smothering out the indigenous businesses. And so that got me thinking, well, we do still have to grow, and how does nature grow? And I found that nature is a localist as well, that nature grows deeper in place to become more resilient, more diverse, more creative, more in service to the needs of the ecosystem. And that's just how we can grow our businesses and economies, to go deeper in place. And my favorite example of this is Zingerman's Bakery in Ann Arbor, a famous deli that could have been a national chain, But instead of that, they started what they call the Zingerman family of businesses, a bakery, a creamery to make yogurt and cheese and ice cream from local dairies, coffee roasting, and 8 more businesses with a total sale of 65 million. So by doing this, they reduced the imports into their community and increased local self-reliance in our basic needs. And they also spread ownership more broadly because they made their employees owners in each new business. The second lesson was protecting what we love. I had heard about climate change back in the 90s, and we actually started having programming at the White Dog, speakers on climate change. But I had heard about renewable energy, that you could sign up for it, but I hadn't done anything until there was a drought in Pennsylvania. And when I was walking in the woods up in the Pocono Mountains, could see the damage that the drought was doing to the woods that I cared about, how the leaves were starting to fall off from the top of the trees in August, how the creek was bone dry, all the ferns were wilted, and as walking through the forest, there was just an eerie silence. Not even the birds were singing. And I finally got it. Oh my gosh, this is what it's going to happen. That parts of the world are going to have droughts and fires, and other parts, storms and floods. So I just went over to a big tree and became a tree hugger. I pressed my face against the bark and promised I would go back to Philadelphia and figure out, how to sign up for renewable energy. And then the White Dog became the first business in Pennsylvania to purchase 100% of our electricity from renewable sources. The next lesson, moving me to we, from me to we, these were farmers that supplied the White Dog from Branch Creek Farm. One of the things the White Dog was most known for was buying from local farmers, and that was like back in the 80s when it was not common. So Mark used to say that, farmer Mark, that good farming was the balance of masculine and feminine energies. That if you had too much masculine energy, which he considered to be efficiency, and not enough feminine, which he characterized as nurturing, you might have a well-run farm, but you're not going to have the best tomatoes. On the other hand, if you have too much feminine energy, too much nurturing, and not enough efficiency, the masculine energy, you might have beautiful tomatoes and happy chickens, but you're going to go out of business because you're not using your time in a wise way. So this got me thinking about how our industrial food system has no feminine energy whatsoever, no nurturing. It's all about efficiency. How little light, air, space, food, water do we give these laying hens in order to produce the cheapest egg possible? So of course we switched to all pastured chickens and eggs. Then I found out about the plight of the pig, how they're kept in these, mother pigs kept in these cages, but they can't even move around their entire lives, and the baby's taken away prematurely as though they were in a factory. So I just walked into the kitchen one day and said, take all the pork off the menu. We can't be a part of this cruel system. So within days, we were able to find a local source. This is in Lancaster County for pastured pork. We would buy like the whole animal. We ordered two pigs a week and used all the meat. Then I found out about the plight of the cow, that they're herbivores. They should be eating grass, but instead they're put in these stockyards and fed grain. So we switched to all pastured meat from Buck Run Farm, Black Angus. So I finally got to the point, this is Dougie with her goats. We bought goat cheese from her, and Doug used to say that when she kissed her goat's ears, it made the cheese better. And I think that's probably true. So, I looked at my menu and thought, well, we finally done it. All of our, our meats and animal products come from small, sustainable farms where the animals are treated with care and respect. This is going to be our market niche. This is our competitive advantage. This is all about us. And then I had a transformational moment that really changed my life when I realized that there is no such thing as one sustainable business. We can only be part of a sustainable system. That no matter how many good products I had within my business, I thought that the best I could do was to buy renewable energy, source local humane meat and organic fruits and vegetables, all these things. That was my role. That's the highest I could go. But then I realized, no, it's actually the sustainable system, that we have to create not just a circle around the white dog with our suppliers, but to put our attention into the whole food system that can supply our region. So I started Fair Food, a nonprofit, to introduce chefs to farmers, and we started a farm stand. We put out a local food guide. I asked the farmer who was bringing me 2 pigs a week, would you like to expand your business and deliver to more restaurants? And he said yes. And I said, what's holding you back? And he said he needed $30,000 to buy a refrigerated truck. So I loaned him the money for the truck, and he started delivering to my competitors. I feel like this is, I call this moving from me to we, from individualism, to community. No matter how many good practices we might have in our individual business, that we really need to think in terms of the whole community. Moving from competition to cooperating with our competitors. And so there's always competition. I mean, you cooperate to build the local food system, and then the chefs compete. So who can make the most tasty food with recipes with the local food, and then moving from hoarding to sharing, and from fear to love. I mean, at first I was afraid to share with my competitors. I thought, oh my gosh, my sales will go down. I might even go out of business. But it was really my love of the pigs foremost that caused me to make this decision and convince my competitors to buy humane meat products. So I just want to tell you a little bit about my life that led up to this decision and the way I operate now. I spent a year living in an Eskimo village in Alaska in 1969 when I graduated from college. And there I am at 22 wearing my Eskimo outfit. And so from the Eskimos, I witnessed, a way of life that was based on cooperation and sharing. And this was exemplified by the seal party. When a man caught his first seal at the end of a season, his wife would have a seal party at their house, at their home, and divide the seal meat up equally between all the families. And then anything else that the family had accumulated during the year that they didn't need for survival was also given away, whether it's fabric or buttons or whatever. And then at the end of the party, bubble gum and candy is thrown up into the air, and everybody catches it. I was right out there catching it as well. The idea here, which is the same with most Indigenous people, is to act with reciprocity, that you give as much as you receive. And that's something that we've lost in our culture, that we feel like we can just keep receiving, keep hoarding money, and not giving back as much as we get. And the Eskimos were the happiest people I've ever met. And I realized it was because their happiness did not depend on money or anything material. Their happiness depended on community, on a sense of belonging. So this really influenced my whole life, was this experience. And it's always been Indigenous people that have taught me my greatest lessons. And the second lesson was from the Zapatistas in Chiapas. And they had their uprising on the day that NAFTA went into effect, January 1st, 1994. And I went down to find out what was happening. I don't have time to go into this, but we at the White Dog had an international sister restaurant project where we established sister relationships with restaurants in different countries. And then we brought our customers there to understand how US foreign policy affects the lives of others. So I ended up going down there every year for 10 years and learned that the uprising was to revolt from globalization, that they wanted to maintain something I never thought about, and that was local self-reliance. They wanted to keep their and local identity and culture. They wanted to keep their way of life, making the same clothes that they have for generations, and not be end up in maquiladoras making cheap clothes to be exported. They wanted to be able to grow their food for their own family and to sell in the domestic marketplace, and not be forced out of business by cheap corn being put in their market from subsidized by the US taxpayers. I realized that what was happening to the farmers in Chiapas were also happening to my own farmers, that and actually around the world, that we had lost our local self-reliance and our basic needs, that most communities had become dependent on large corporations to deliver their food, deliver their energy, deliver clothing, whatever our basic needs were, and that this was a dangerous and vulnerable position to be in. So that's what I learned from the Zapatistas. So then I started envisioning that a sustainable global economy is a network of sustainable local economies. That locally we produce our basic needs as much as we possibly can, and then there's still global trade when we trade our excess for what we don't have locally, whether it's bananas or coffee or whatever, and that we trade in what's unique about our regions, a special wine or a cheese or a fashion or innovation. So it's not that there's no global trade or national trade, but that we produce our basic needs, what we need to survive close to home. I wrote a book I sold The White Dog in 2010, and then wrote a book about my life up until that part that covers what I've been talking about in more detail. And so 2 years ago, I started All Together Now. I must say, in order to shorten my presentation, I took out the part about my learning from Standing Rock, but I was greatly moved by Standing Rock and their courage in protecting the river and their way of life and their land, from fossil fuels. And that led to a whole program I did in Pennsylvania, but I don't have time for that. If you have questions, I could talk about it in our breakout. So All Together Now, our mission is to unite urban and rural communities to build resilient, self-reliant regional economies that work for all. And historically, urban and rural communities used to co-create local supply chains to produce basic needs, and there was trust and understanding, respect between urban and rural communities. And globalization severed those local supply chains and cast these two communities apart. And now they're at odds with each other, and something that Trump has taken advantage of. And something that is kind of an ulterior motive for us is to bring together, to politically unite our rural and urban communities. So the basic needs that we're focusing on All Together Now are food, plant medicine, clothing and textiles, sustainable building materials, and renewable energy. So when we produce our basic needs locally, we move power, wealth, and opportunity from distant corporations to our own communities. So this is about economic justice as well. And there's urgency. As the weather becomes more and more chaotic, we can no longer depend on long distance global supply chains to deliver us our basic needs. Those supply chains are going to be disrupted by weather, by social upheaval, by pandemics. We saw in this last pandemic how the centralized corporate controlled supply chains for food were disrupted. And at least in my community, it was the local farmers that organized and were able to deliver food to the cities. So I really feel that what we do today to build local economies that are self-reliant in our basic needs will determine the survival or not of future generations as things get worse. And at the same time, we're mitigating our carbons as we build this new economy locally. So I also feel that politically that the whole concept of local self-reliance is the common ground between the political left and the political right. That the right has long valued self-reliance. The left has long valued communal efforts, cooperation and community, and you put the two together, community self-reliance, it's the common ground, I believe, and we'll be discovering that as we move along in our work. So what we're trying to do at All Together Now are three different things. The two things are the most important: increasing the supply of our basic needs. So we're building local supply chains, producing food, plant medicine, clothing, and sustainable building materials. We're doing that by forming these coalitions of farms and businesses where we connect them. So they become partners, they buy and sell from each other. There's peer-to-peer learning and so on. So we have, we were really stymied by COVID, of course, because we couldn't meet in person. And But anyways, but we've been doing that, and we identify the gaps in the supply chain, and the idea is that will help Black and Brown entrepreneurs start businesses where we see these gaps. We're working with, or we'll begin working with a new incubator in Philadelphia, and the role of Altogether now will be to educate entrepreneurs about the importance of local self-reliance and help guide them in their business development to help fill the gaps in these local supply chains with new businesses. And then we also, advocate for regenerative agriculture in our programming when we gather farmers and so on. The other thing we do is that we increase the demand for local. So we're increasing the supply and we're increasing the demand. So we're educating the public about why local self-reliance. We're promoting local products, on our website. We're just about to produce our first newsletter, which will highlight local companies, and we're developing a marketplace where people can order through us. They find the product to us, and then they take them to the website of the producer. And we're building a community of shared values. I feel like that's kind of the foundation of the work, is to change our values to be those of cooperation and sharing. And we have celebrations of local culture and the joy of community. So now that COVID is over, we're starting to plan these dinners. We have a hemp dinner planned where the chef will use locally produced hemp oil for cooking, and hemp flour and hemp seeds and so on. We have a number of events planned, like that. And then the last thing we do, which is a smaller part of our work, is advocating for a supportive legislation. So right now, we have a project called Pot Profits for Pennsylvanians. You all have already legalized adult use, but Pennsylvania has not yet. And so the way that this bill is framed is exceedingly important, because otherwise the large outside corporations, there's now like a marijuana oligarchy in this country, and they're trying to buy up all the businesses. And so this is like a once in a generation opportunity for businesses and farmers to get into this market. And so anyway, so we have a campaign that's advocating for supportive legislation. So the Industrial Hemp Coalition, we began that, it'll be 2 years ago this summer. This is at Pocono Organics, their first field of hemp. And this is where we'll be having our hemp dinner in July or August. We haven't set a date yet. We've been promoting hemp. That's me at a Hempcrete week. We've been promoting Hempcrete as a sustainable building material. And we did a week of demonstrations, and also in the city, we see this as an opportunity for new businesses and job creation of using hemp. So we did a demonstration in Philadelphia on using Hempcrete. We have a clothing and textile coalition. This is a local brand, Loboma. So we're holding up local designers and manufacturing, but we're also like working on the supply chain for being able to eventually have a dirt to shirt supply chain of hemp and flax are the two textile fibers that grow in our climate. Our Plant Medicine Coalition, this is a meeting we had out at Botanical Barefoot Botanicals, a plant medicine farm. And so we've been doing educational programmings with the health benefits of plant medicine. So we talk about CBD, THC, as well as traditional plant medicines, like golden seal, lavender, and so on. And we're planning a whole series of these educational programs and tours to the farms, trying to move business away from the big farm, to plant medicine, including marijuana. And of course, big farm is one of the industries that's trying to keep legalization from happening. And they're also now at the federal level trying to cap the potency of THC grown in our communities so that it can't really compete with, their antidepressants and so on. We have a grain coalition. This is a meeting with farmers and the end users, like the bread makers, the pasta makers, the breweries, and so on. So again, we're working on the supply chain from farm to mill to a Philly bread maker. And during the pandemic, we did a pantry box made up of different products from the Grain Coalition that we sold, delivered to households. And then with the profits of that, we gave free boxes to under-resourced communities. And we did a guide to finding local food during the pandemic. One example of our work is that this grocery store, Riverward's Produce, could not source flour during the pandemic. There's a run on flour because everybody was suddenly doing home baking, and he couldn't get it from his normal supplier. And so through Altogether Now, he found a local supplier, Small Valley Mills, and drove out there with a station wagon and picked up the flour, and now has become a regular customer of theirs. We have a renewable energy advisory group. So right now we're just educating about renewable energy, where in Pennsylvania you can get it. We don't have an actual project yet, but we'd like to develop one in community solar, where a group of houses are connected to one array. And then we also have a zero waste advisory group. This is in a business that reuses glass. They blow glass into new shapes and so on. And they've just started a glass recycling project because our city no longer recycles appropriately. So we're working on a guide to sustainable living in Pennsylvania. So that will be our database with everything we're learning. So we'll have, how do you sign up for renewable energy? Like, what are your choices? What are the grids like in Pennsylvania? What are your choices for, zero waste groups? What do you do when you have electronics you want to get rid of, or clothing or whatever? So a lot of what we're doing is around education and communication. And ultimately, we're trying to build a caring economy where, whether we're a business owner or a consumer or an investor, that we make economic decisions not to maximize profits, but to maximize the health and well-being of our communities and ecosystems while receiving a fair return. And we feel that this is really the foundation for the transformation that we're looking for in building this new economy. That we've been brainwashed to think that we're suckers if we don't get the lowest price. I mean, I have friends that are wealthy that still go to these discount houses to buy like cheap meat and whatnot. Or cheap clothes, or whatever, when they could afford better, and not thinking about the consequences. So that's kind of the foundation for transformation. And so that's it. There's our website, Altogether Now, PA.org, where you can get more information about what we do. And so that is my presentation.
Amazing. So inspiring, Judy. And I feel like we have bits of that in the Hudson Valley, but you just do such an amazing job, like putting all these different pieces together. It's really cool.
Thanks.